There'd be extra glances to check in on her and to confirm her real intentions. There'd be loaded statements, jokes that weren't funny, a stable uptick in looking over his shoulder, as though expecting someone from her family to be there. Zach was too quick and too smart not to notice and add it all up. What would his clients think about having someone from a crime family doing his books and sending out invoices? It didn't matter that she was honest. Her family's history and reputation would taunt her, paint her with the same brush as though she was truly one of them. The changes would be suitable. Clients double-checking to ensure her billing was accurate. A downturn in his company renewed accounts. An increase in questions about the entry of a system he'd install and who could disarm it. Zach shifted on the bar stool beside her. "You worked in a pub?" he asked. She turned quietly, afraid what she'd see in her husband's eyes, those beautiful blue eyes that were always watching. She lied to him, and that wasn't who she wanted to be, but most importantly, not who she wanted him to think she was. She was caught, though. How could she protect herself as well as Xavier if she told the truth? "Nightclub," she said, keeping her voice low enough that Amy and Mo couldn't hear them from their spot at the end of the bar. They were looking at a booklet of available song titles, each page flipped punctuate by laughter. Cole was sitting nearby, hands clasped on the countertop, completing his thumbnail and too far away from Catherine and Zach to eavesdrop. "What went wrong?" Zach asked. She noted that he hadn't asked what had happened or whether she liked the job. "What didn't?" She tried for a chuckle to ease the tightness in her chest, but ended up choking instead. "You want to talk about it?" he asked when she eased coughing. "Not especially." They sat in silence for a moment. Zach was pointedly not looking at her, giving her space. Ali rocking Xavier in his carrier. It was tempting to tell him everything. "But you should know," she said quietly. She liked Zach, and she wanted this, whatever it was, to work. And to do that, she needed to be as upfront and honest as possible. If she started lying now, it wouldn't stop until the truth surfaced in one awful tangled mess. And she knew exactly where dishonesty and large omissions led when it came to relationships. Zach had stilled his shoulders, tipping forward as he waited and listened. Her heart was racing like she was being chased as she fought for the courage to let Zach in. Just a little bit, enough that what they had could be based on honesty. "It closed down," she said, forcing the words through her tightening throat and past her lips. "I was events manager for several years. I almost did some light accounting and a bit of record keeping, and mostly for the bands I booked." Her mind swept back through time to the nightclub, the pulse of bass throbbing in her chest while she worked, the flash of strobe lights, the sense of excitement over what each night would bring and whether a celebrity could come by. The place had been trendy, busy, even on weeknights, and the profits had made her grin with pride. Although apparently a substantial amount of those profits had been from her bookings. "What happened?" Zach asked. The club was a cover for a gang. She met his gaze, surprised by the lack of emotion she felt. It was as if someone had numbed her entire nervous system. "They were laundering money." "Were you brought in by the police?" She nodded. "But I wasn't. I was in the dark." The sharp sting of hallucination hit her through the numbness. No matter how she lived her life, she felt as though her family would always taunt it, and would always find a way to intrude on whatever she managed to set aside for herself. She could feel Zach's presence beside her, his steady warmth as his gaze took her in, giving her way too much space to voice her secrets. "I'm sorry, Zach." "Why?" "I should have told you sooner. I understand if you no longer want me working with your financials." "Why?" because she waved a hand through the air as though summoning up her story. Hadn't he been listening? Why would he want to be associated with someone who had been involved, even unwittingly, with a business that had been closed down due to money laundering charges? I was associated. Did you help launder money? Not intentionally. Help assist in tax evasions? She leaned back, feeling insulted. No. Did she look like she would? Still, no. Anything illegal or unethical? Catherine foamed at him, then said, I once gave a friend a drink on the house because it was her birthday. Zach's chest bounced, his shoulders shaking as he held in a quiet laugh. And that's got you all stung up tighter than a kitten in a ball of Christmas lights. She tugged the hem of his shirt into place and tried not to huff at him. He draped an arm across her shoulder. Oh, Catherine. He planted a kiss against her temple, then withdraw, retreating back to his own space. She wanted to follow, wanted to release his distance a little while longer. She wanted to hear him say her name with that hint of affection one more time, and craved to have his lips land against her flesh once again, only longer next time, because this was almost too much, almost like a dream come true. Zach was well aware that Catherine hadn't told him the whole story about the money laundering scheme. He thought as if she left some things out, as her sense of responsibility seemed to outweigh the wrongdoing. Embarrassed and ashamed, yes, but to still feel so responsible, that was a good indicator that something wasn't lining up quite right. Whatever it was, he knew it was just another thread in the story of Catherine's past that he'd yet to unreel, like the lengths of yarn tangled at his grandmother's feet. As Zach guided Catherine to his Land Rover, Xavier dozing in the car seat he was carrying, he said, You know money laundering is difficult to sniff out. The whole scheme is designed to get undetected. Catherine took Xavier and focused on securing his carrier in the SUV. Zach watched, forcing himself to consider that she might not be as innocent as his gut suggested. He took the brush out of the back and began sweeping the alternate snow off his vehicle. Catherine was in the front seat, seatbelt secured, mittened hands clenched in her lap. What would it take to unwind her again? Was he going to have to find a way to get her back on the karaoke stage? It must have been a while ago, he said, once he was in the driver's seat. Yeah, he was fishing like an agent might, but he told himself that he was being supportive, a supportive husband. It was either this or Sin Logan digging into her past, and that felt like a major breach of trust right now. I should have seen the signs. Why's that? She turned to him, eyes blazing, because she was adamant but didn't clarify why. Simply clenched her seat belt tighter, as if it might help her keep her fears and guilt locked inside. I'm a good secret keeper. He gave her a nod and a serious look, playfully pretending to zip up his lips, lock them, then tossed the make-believe key over his right shoulder. See, he mumbled through closed lips. He opened them to add, I can't tell anybody anything. My lips are sealed. Plus, we're under the cone of silence right now. Anything happens in here will not be heard elsewhere and can never escape. She didn't reply for a long moment, and he gave her a light nudge. You seem to be able to speak just fine at the moment, despite your so-called locked lips, she said. That is for hallucination purposes. I'm not a vandalist. I find them a little bit creepy, actually. The hinge that had been tightening her shoulders loosened its grip, and her hands almost unclenched. I'm a good listener, he coaxed. Is that because your grandmother? She trained me in many notable ways. Fine. You know what? Fine. You want to know? Yes. He started driving toward home, figuring it would be easier for her to open up if his attention was split between her and the road. I can't stand the fact that added them unwittingly. People trusted us. He made a supportive sound, encouraging her to keep talking. I thought I was doing a good thing. I brought in good bands and ensured that our club maintained a good reputation. We cared about our portions in our neighborhood. We had breathalyzers and free rides home for those in need. We were a responsible nightclub. He made another responsive sound. People trusted us, and I thought we were good people, but we weren't. Her hands flew up in the air. I feel so betrayed. She let out a shaky sigh, her shoulders collapsing and taken advantage of. At least they weren't off murdering people, he joked. You know, whacking people in the back room. Her face collapsed, and you could tell she was wondering if something like that had indeed occurred. Typically, that stuff only happens in movies, he said quickly. She shook her head. I'm sure it happens, but hopefully it didn't at the club. There was a registration in her voice, a sorrow he couldn't quite understand. It happens here, all over the world, and more often than the average person realized. Maybe that was the reason for Catherine's distress. She was an average person, and it made sense that discovering how she'd been assisting in creating a front to mask illegal activities will weigh heavily on her. Sometimes people do bad things. All we can do is try and put more good out into the world. He glanced her way and found her eyes damp and full of gratitude. He pulled into a garage. A moment later, the dim light filtering in around them. I'm glad I found you, she said. She leaned across the console between them, lightly planting a kiss on his cheek that broke a small piece of him. He wasn't sure what it was, only that it was one he had used to protect himself, to shelter himself from feeling the things that were slowly slipping out in regards to the woman across from him, his wife.